She stood in the rain beside a tiny white coffin, her black veil trembling as tears slid down her cheeks. Cameras flashed, capturing every second of her heartbreak, but the man standing next to her, her ex-husband, billionaire CEO Leonard Moreau, didn't flinch. He leaned closer, his voice low and cold. "Don't cry, Isabel. It's bad for my image." In that moment, the world saw only a powerful man preserving his reputation, but inside, two shattered hearts were about to collide again in a storm of love, loss, and redemption. Welcome to today's story, a tale that will make you question how far pride can go before love finally breaks through. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from, and if you believe no amount of money can buy true love, go ahead and give this video a like right now. It really helps the channel reach more hearts like yours. Now, let's dive into this heartbreaking and unforgettable story. The rain fell in steady sheets over Geneva, the kind of cold, endless drizzle that made the whole city feel like it was holding its breath. In the top floor of a gleaming glass tower overlooking Lake Lemon, Leonard Moreau stood before a wall of windows, his reflection staring back at him, impeccable, unfeeling, and perfectly composed. He was the face of Moreau Industries, the man every business magazine called the definition of discipline. Yet as his assistant read the latest press statement aloud, his mind was somewhere else, on a small wooden cradle that once sat beside his bed, now empty forever. "Make sure the press keeps the tone dignified," Leonard said flatly, straightening his cufflinks. "We're not seeking pity. We're maintaining grace." His assistant nodded, but her eyes flickered with discomfort. Behind the power and polish, there was something almost unnatural about him, like a man sculpted from ice. Somewhere across the border, in a modest village outside Lyon, Isabelle Laurent woke before dawn to the sound of church bells echoing faintly through the mist. She sat up in bed, clutching the small stuffed lamb that had belonged to her baby. Her room was simple but full of warmth, soft light, photographs, flowers that had long since wilted but were never thrown away. The past year had hollowed her out, yet she smiled faintly as she looked at the children's center. She ran through her window, where a few early-rising kids were already kicking a football on the muddy lawn. Helping others had become her refuge. But this morning, the world seemed heavier. When she opened her mailbox, a crisp envelope bearing the Moreau Industries seal stared back at her. Her hands trembled as she slid it open. "You are cordially invited to the private funeral of Leon Moreau Jr., it read. No warmth. No emotion. Just formality. Her throat tightened as she read Leonard's signature at the bottom, cold, precise, distant. The man she once called her husband had become a stranger. A memory flickered, his hand brushing her cheek years ago, whispering that he would always protect her. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "You broke everything, Leonard." Meanwhile, in his office, Leonard stood surrounded by silence. He opened the drawer of his desk and pulled out a tiny silver rattle engraved with their son's name. For the first time in years, his mask faltered. His reflection blurred in the glass as if the rain outside was seeping into him. Down below, the city moved on, oblivious to the quiet war raging inside two hearts forever connected by love and loss. Across the distance, Isabelle folded the invitation and whispered to the empty room, "I'll go." But not for him. Her voice cracked. "For our child." The storm outside grew heavier, as if the sky itself was mourning with her. What would you do if the person who once held your heart became the same person who crushed it in your worst moment? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The sky over Paris was heavy with clouds the color of ash as a convoy of black cars moved slowly through the cemetery gates. Each tire hissed against the wet gravel, each movement deliberate, choreographed for the world that would soon see it through lenses and headlines. Leonard Moreau stepped out first, tall, immaculate, and terrifyingly composed in a tailored black coat that cost more than most people's cars. His umbrella opened with military precision, held by a silent aide. Around him, cameras clicked like insects. The press had been warned to keep their distance, yet they swarmed at the edges of the iron gates, hungry for the perfect picture of a billionaire in mourning. Leonard ignored them. His steps were measured, his jaw set. This was not grief, it was performance, and he knew it. He had built his life on image, and today would be no different, even if the coffin waiting at the end of the path contained his son. From the other side of the procession, Isabelle Laurent arrived alone. Her taxi driver, sensing the weight of her silence, had not spoken during the entire ride. She stepped out without an umbrella, letting the rain soak through her black dress, her curls sticking to her face. The drizzle blurred the edges of the marble tombstones until they looked like ghosts watching. For a moment she froze, staring at the coffin, small and heartbreakingly white, resting beneath the canopy of black silk. Her chest tightened. That was their child. The baby who had once gripped her finger with impossible strength. Her breath caught, and she felt the familiar sting of tears. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry, not in front of him. But promises made to the heart rarely hold. Leonard's gaze found her instantly. Even across the distance, she radiated something he couldn't control, raw humanity, the one thing his world could not manufacture. She walked toward him slowly, her heels sinking into the damp earth, and he felt something twist in his chest, something dangerously close to regret. When she stopped beside him, he nodded stiffly. "Isabelle," he said, voice clipped and formal. "Leonard." Her reply was just a whisper, but her tone carried years of buried emotion. The priest began to speak in soft French, his voice blending with the rain. Words like innocence, forgiveness, and eternal rest floated through the air, barely reaching their ears. Leonard's eyes never left the cameras in the distance. He was aware of every flash, every angle, every potential headline. He stood perfectly still, the very picture of stoic grace. Isabelle, meanwhile, trembled. The priest's voice faded into the background as she stared at the coffin, her lips trembling. Memories came rushing in uninvited, the first time their son laughed, the night he'd had a fever and Leonard had stayed at the office instead of coming home, the last moment she'd held the baby before the doctors whispered there's nothing more we can do. Her vision blurred. A sob escaped her throat before she could stop it. Leonard turned sharply toward her, his expression tightening. The cameras were watching. The board of directors would see this. The investors. The world. "Please," he muttered, low enough for only her to hear, "not now. Don't cry." Isabelle blinked, confused. "What?" His voice hardened, whisper sharp as glass. "It's bad for my image." The word struck like a blade. For a heartbeat she couldn't breathe. Then something inside her broke, not loudly, but completely. The priest continued his prayer, unaware of the private earthquake happening beside him. Isabelle's face went pale. Her tears stopped, not because the pain ended, but because it had grown too heavy to carry. She turned her head slowly toward Leonard, studying him like he was a stranger. "Your image," she whispered, the words barely audible through the rain. He didn't answer. His jaw stayed locked, his eyes fixed forward, afraid to look at her and see the monster he'd become. The silence between them was deafening. The umbrellas around them rustled, guests shifting awkwardly, pretending not to hear. For Isabelle, the world tilted. She saw their entire marriage in that one sentence, the dinner parties, the forced smiles, the endless press events where she was coached on what to wear, what to say, how to stand. She saw herself crying alone in rooms too beautiful to feel human. And she saw him, always performing. Always protecting his empire from the truth that he was terrified of being seen as weak. The priest invited them to place roses on the coffin. Leonard stepped forward first, placing a perfect white bloom on top, adjusting it slightly until it looked symmetrical. When Isabelle approached, her hand trembled. She laid her rose gently beside his, then stepped back. Her heart screamed inside her chest, but she said nothing. The rain began to pour harder, drenching them both. Finally, she spoke, softly, trembling. He deserved better than this. Leonard turned, startled, but before he could respond, she walked away. Her heels clicked against the stone path, each step louder than the thunder above. Photographers whispered as she passed, one camera caught her face, broken, beautiful, defiant. Leonard watched her disappear through the crowd, her figure swallowed by the grey mist. For the first time in his adult life, he felt powerless. He had money, reputation, influence, but he couldn't control her. Not anymore. The ceremony ended, guests dispersing in whispers. Leonard stood alone before the tiny coffin, rain soaking his expensive suit. Somewhere behind him, a reporter murmured, "Cold as marble." He ignored it, but the words sank deep. He looked at the white coffin and whispered, "I'm sorry, mon fils." But the apology came too late, for both the son who would never hear it and the woman who no longer cared to. 2 days later, the city buzzed with gossip. Every morning paper showed Leonard's expressionless face beside Isabel's tear-streaked one, the caption reading "The Ice King and the Woman Who Wept." Stock commentators wondered if grief would affect his company's stability. Gossip blogs dissected Isabel's dress as if it were a political statement. The media storm grew louder until even Leonard's closest allies began to keep their distance. At the same time, Isabel's charity started receiving anonymous donations, thousands of euros poured in overnight. She suspected Leonard's guilt but refused to confirm it. Instead, she poured her energy into helping the children at her center, but each night she found herself staring at the ceiling, replaying his words. Somewhere inside her anger, a small voice whispered, he didn't know how to love any other way. On the third morning, a black car stopped outside her foundation. Her volunteers exchanged nervous looks as Leonard Moreau stepped out wearing a grey coat, his expression unreadable. Isabel froze when she saw him through the glass door. "You shouldn't be here," she said when he entered. "If you're here to control another narrative, you can leave." Leonard removed his glove slowly. "I'm not here for the cameras." "Good," she said. "There aren't any." The room smelled of chalk and paint, children's drawings covered the walls, bright suns, stick figures holding hands. Leonard looked around, almost painfully out of place among the color and innocence. "I saw your work," he said quietly. "You've built something beautiful." Isabel crossed her arms. "I built it from what you broke." The words hit him harder than she intended. "I deserve that," he admitted. "But I came to apologize." She blinked, unsure she'd heard him correctly. "Apologize? Now?" His voice faltered. "At the funeral, I told me not to cry because it was bad for your image," she finished. "Yes. I remember." "I didn't mean you did," she interrupted, her tone sharp. "You always mean it, Leonard. You always choose appearance over heart." He stepped closer, rain dripping from his coat onto the polished floor. "I've spent my entire life building a world where emotion is weakness," he said. "That day, I realized it cost me everything that mattered." Isabel looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. "You think one apology can erase what you did? Our son deserved a father who would have held him instead of holding a press statement." He closed his eyes, pain flashing across his face. "I know," he whispered. "I know I failed him. And you." The air between them grew heavy, filled with years of unsaid things. For a heartbeat, the noise of children laughing outside softened the tension. Isabel turned away, pretending to tidy a stack of papers just to keep from shaking. "Why are you really here, Leonard?" she asked finally. "To make yourself feel better." "No," he said. "To tell you that you were right. He deserved better. You both did." She glanced over her shoulder, searching his face for the familiar arrogance, but it wasn't there. Only exhaustion. Only grief. "Then say it to him," she said quietly, nodding toward a small framed photo of their son on her desk. Leonard approached it slowly, his breath trembling. "Je suis désolé, mon petit Angie," he whispered. "Papa eu peur. Per diem trop fort." Isabel's throat tightened. She hadn't heard him speak with that kind of tenderness in years. For a moment, she saw the man she had once fallen in love with, the one who had kissed her hands in the kitchen while rocking their baby between them. She blinked quickly, forcing herself back to the present. "Words don't bring him back," she said. "No," Leonard agreed. "But maybe they can stop me from losing what's left." Their eyes met, and for the first time since the funeral, neither looked away. The silence stretched until Claire, Isabel's friend, entered with a stack of folders and froze at the sight. "Oh," she muttered awkwardly. Should I come back later? Please, Isabel said, voice calm but distant. Show Mr. Moreau the door. Leonard hesitated, his eyes pleading. Isabel, please. Just one chance to talk. Not as your ex-husband, not as the man who failed you, just as someone trying to understand how to live again. Her jaw clenched. You had every chance when it mattered. Claire cleared her throat softly, signaling for him to leave. Leonard exhaled, nodded, and turned toward the door. But just before stepping out, he stopped. For what it's worth, he said, without looking back, the world calls you my ex-wife, but I've never stopped calling you my heart. Then he walked out, leaving her rooted in place, trembling. The sound of the door closing echoed through the hall like a final verdict. Claire placed a gentle hand on Isabel's shoulder. You okay? Isabel swallowed hard. No, she whispered. But I think he finally is. Outside, Leonard paused under the grey sky. He didn't go to his car. Instead, he stood by the curb, watching the children in the yard chase a bright red ball through the puddles. Their laughter was raw and unfiltered, something he hadn't heard in so long. For the first time, the rain didn't bother him. He tilted his head back and let it fall across his face, washing away the image, the facade, the billionaire mask. Somewhere behind the window, Isabel watched him go, her hand pressed against the glass. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she didn't feel hate, just the aching, complicated shadow of love that refused to die. And as the clouds began to thin, a faint glow of sunlight broke through, touching both of them with the same quiet grace, as if their son was sending a whisper from somewhere beyond, it's okay to feel again. If someone who broke your heart came back truly changed, would you give them the chance to prove it? Tell me in the comments below, and if this moment moved you, don't forget to like the video, it helps bring more stories like this to life. The following week, silence became a weapon neither of them knew how to wield. Isabel threw herself into her work, arriving early at the center and staying long after the children had gone home, cleaning brushes, rearranging shelves, anything to keep her mind from circling back to Leonard. But he was everywhere, in the faint scent of the cologne that lingered on her coat from his visit, in the sound of passing cars that reminded her of the black one he'd arrived in the lullabies she played for the children that used to calm their son to sleep. At night, she'd lie awake replaying his apology, wondering if there had been truth in it or just another layer of his control. Across the city, Leonard buried himself in meetings, his calendar overflowing with board calls, interviews, and endless emails. Yet none of it stuck. The words blurred together. The empire he'd built now felt hollow, a monument to everything he'd done wrong. His assistant, Emile, noticed the change, his boss's sharpness dulled, his temper frayed. Sir, Emile said one evening as Leonard stared blankly at his computer screen, you haven't signed any of the documents. That's the third time this week. Leonard blinked as though waking from a dream. What did you say? You seem distracted, sir. Maybe take some time away. Time away? Leonard repeated, almost laughing. Do you think men like me get to take time away? Emile hesitated, then quietly replied, maybe that's why men like you end up alone. Leonard looked up sharply, but Emile didn't flinch. The younger man bowed slightly and left the room, leaving Leonard to stare at the glass wall that separated him from the glittering city. He saw his reflection again, the one that had once made him proud, but now it looked like a ghost wearing his face. At that exact moment, Isabel was sitting in a meeting with her foundation sponsors. The topic was expansion funding for a new children's clinic, something she'd dreamed of for years. Yet as one of the board members mentioned Leonard's name, he was still a major donor. After all, her heart skipped painfully. If we accept further contributions from Moreau Industries, one woman said delicately, will it not cause unwanted attention after the funeral incident? Isabel clenched her pen. Our work isn't about publicity, she said firmly. It's about healing. Of course, another member added, but his reputation affects ours. Isabel's voice dropped, calm but sharp. Then perhaps we stop letting reputation define what good we can do. The room went silent. For the first time since the funeral, she felt something like power return to her chest. When the meeting ended, she stepped outside into the afternoon sun. For once, it wasn't raining. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth touch her face. Somewhere, maybe, the world was forgiving her for staying strong. But peace never lasted long. That evening, as she was locking the center's doors, a familiar deep voice broke the quiet. "You're working too late again." She froze. Leonard stood near the gate, dressed simply in a sweater and coat, no entourage, no cameras, just him. "How did you find me?" she asked, wary. "I didn't have to," he said softly. "I've been driving by every night." Her heart thudded. "That's not comforting, Leonard. That's obsession." "No," he said, taking a step closer. "It's regret." She sighed, shaking her head. "You said your apology." "I heard it. We don't need to do this again." "You don't understand," he said. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness." "Then what do you want?" she demanded. He hesitated, as if the answer hurt. "To remember him with you. Just once." The words hit her like a blow. "You mean visit his grave?" Leonard nodded. "Tomorrow morning. No photographers. No press. Just us." Isabel stared at him, searching his eyes for deceit. But there was none. Just exhaustion and truth. "I'll think about it," she said, unlocking her car. As she got in, Leonard called softly, "You were the only real thing I ever had, Isabel. Don't let my mistakes erase that." She didn't answer. She drove off, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. That night, sleep didn't come easily for either of them. Leonard sat by the window of his penthouse, watching the city lights fade into dawn. For the first time, he didn't reach for his phone or a drink. He just sat there, letting the emptiness breathe. Isabel, meanwhile, stood by her dresser, staring at a small velvet box. Inside was her wedding ring, still glinting as if it remembered better days. She touched it gently before closing the lid again. The next morning, when she arrived at the cemetery, he was already there, dressed in black but stripped of his usual arrogance. He looked smaller somehow, human. They stood in silence before the small grave, the marble inscription simple, "Leon Moreau Jr., beloved son." Isabel knelt down, brushing away the fallen leaves. "He would have been 2 today," she whispered. Leonard's throat tightened. "I know. He had your eyes," she murmured. "And your stubbornness." A faint smile crossed his face. "Then he had the worst of both of us." Isabel looked up, and for the first time, their gazes softened. For a few seconds, there were no walls, no cameras, just 2 grieving parents holding on to a memory that refused to fade. But as quickly as it came, the moment cracked. Leonard's phone buzzed. He tried to ignore it, but the screen lit up with the name of a board member. Isabel noticed. "Still can't turn it off, can you?" she said quietly. He silenced it, pocketing the device. "Old habits die hard." "No, Leonard," she said, rising to her feet. "Old habits destroy everything you touch." The words hit him like a whip. "You think I don't know that?" he snapped. The sharpness startled them both. Isabel's eyes filled with hurt. "Then why do you keep choosing them over the people who loved you?" His voice dropped. "Because I don't know how to be anything else." Her chest ached at his honesty. "Then maybe that's your punishment," she whispered. She turned to leave, but he caught her wrist gently, his touch trembling. "Please don't walk away again," he said. "Not like this." "You walked away first," she said, pulling free. "And you did it when it mattered most." As she left him standing there, Leonard felt the full weight of every choice he'd made crash down. The graveyard was silent except for the whispering wind through the trees, and for the first time since his son's death, Leonard Moreau dropped to his knees and wept, without shame, without cameras, without fear. 2 weeks passed after that morning at the cemetery, and neither of them spoke again. Isabel convinced herself it was better that way, cleaner, safer, quieter. She filled her days with laughter that wasn't hers, the children at the center tugging at her hands, asking for paint, songs, attention, anything but silence. Yet every time one of them smiled up at her with wide brown eyes, she saw her son. Some nights she dreamed of Leonard kneeling at the grave, his face wet with rain, and she woke gasping, angry at herself for caring. Across the city, Leonard became a rumor in his own company. He stopped attending press conferences, cancelled meetings, and refused interviews. His assistant Emil fielded panicked calls from board members until one afternoon the chairman stormed into the office. "Leonard, you're destroying everything," he hissed. "The investors are nervous. The shareholders are questioning your competence." Leonard didn't look up from the window. "Let them," he said simply. "My son is dead, my marriage is gone. What exactly do you think I care about right now?" The man stared, stunned. "Your legacy, perhaps." Leonard turned then, eyes hollow. "My legacy is a child who never lived to know me." The chairman left speechless, and Emil lingered in the doorway, watching as his boss sank into his chair. For the first time, Emil saw not a titan but a man drowning quietly in guilt. That evening, a news alert flashed across every major outlet, an investigative article claiming Leonard had used company funds for private donations to his ex-wife's foundation. It wasn't true, the money had come from his personal account, but perception was all that mattered. Within hours, cameras surrounded Isabel's center. Reporters shouted accusations, questioning her ethics. "Did Mr. Moreau pay you off? Is this hush money for the funeral incident? Are you still in contact with him?" The children cried as microphones shoved past the fence. Isabel's stomach twisted. "Please," she begged the crowd, "this is a school, not a scandal." But they wouldn't listen. Claire rushed out, pulling her back inside. "It's everywhere, Izzy," she said, breathless. "They're saying you exploited your own child's death for sympathy." Isabel's knees weakened. No, that can't be. Leonard's PR team hasn't said a word," Claire interrupted. "He's letting you burn." Something inside Isabel snapped. He promised no cameras, no attention, and now this. She grabbed her coat, fury fueling her every movement. "I'm going to him." Claire tried to stop her, but Isabel was already gone. When she arrived at Moreau Tower, security hesitated. Everyone knew who she was, but one look at her eyes and they stepped aside. She took the elevator to the top floor, the air cold and sterile. Leonard looked up from his desk when she stormed in. "Isabel, how could you let this happen?" she cried. "Do you have any idea what they're saying about me?" "About the children." "I saw," he said quietly. "Then why haven't you said anything?" "Because anything I say will make it worse." "For you," she snapped. "Or for your image?" He flinched. "You think I'd ever do this intentionally?" "I think you live in a world where lies are easier than truth," she said. "And I'm tired of being collateral damage in your reputation." He rose from his chair, his calm cracking. "I donated to your foundation privately. I didn't expect it to leak." "Then prove it," she demanded. "Tell them the truth." "And drag you back into headlines," he countered. "You think I want them dissecting your life again?" "Our life." "You already did that when you opened your mouth at the funeral," she shot back. The silence that followed was suffocating. Leonard's hands trembled slightly as he ran them through his hair. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Sorry isn't enough," she said, voice shaking. "You built an empire on control, and now everything you touch turns to damage." He looked up at her, eyes dark and desperate. "You think I don't know that? Then stop hiding behind excuses and fix it." For the first time, he shouted. "I don't know how." His voice echoed off the glass walls, startling them both. He took a breath, his shoulders sagging. "I don't know how to fix something that's already dead." Isabel's voice softened. "It doesn't have to be dead. You and I are," he said quietly. "There's nothing left but ashes." "Then learn to build from ashes," she replied. "Our son would have wanted that." He turned away, staring out at the city. "I don't deserve redemption." Maybe not, she said. But you still have responsibility. When she left, Leonard stood motionless, her words repeating in his head until the city lights blurred into a smear of gold and rain. That night, Isabel returned to her empty apartment and collapsed onto the sofa, exhausted. She knew confronting him wouldn't erase the damage, but at least she'd found her voice again. Across town, Leonard's crisis team flooded his inbox with drafts of official statements. He ignored them all. Instead, he opened his phone and composed a single message to Isabel: "I've told the truth. Check the news at midnight." He hit send and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. When midnight came, every major outlet updated its headline: "Leonard Moreau confirms donation to Laurent Foundation was personal, not corporate." He took full responsibility, praised Isabel's work, and declined all interviews. Within hours, public sympathy shifted toward her. The next morning, she arrived at the center to find flowers on the doorstep, a simple note attached: "For the truth you made me face." Isabel stared at the bouquet for a long time, unsure whether to throw it away or keep it. She set it on her desk, beside her son's picture. For the first time, she allowed herself to whisper, "Maybe he's trying." Yet even as she said it, her chest ached with confusion. Pride still told her not to trust him, grief whispered otherwise. Can people who have hurt us ever truly change, or are we just seeing what we want to see? Share your thoughts below, and if this chapter hit you deep, tap the like button to keep the story flowing. The media storm calmed just enough for Isabel to breathe again, but the damage lingered in whispers. Parents at the center looked at her differently, some with pity, others with quiet judgment. "It's not fair," Claire muttered one afternoon as they cleaned brushes together. "You didn't ask for this." Isabel forced a small smile. Fairness isn't a currency people like Leonard deal in. But even as she said it, her voice trembled. She knew deep down that the man who had once broken her heart was trying, fumbling, but trying nonetheless. Days later, an email arrived from Moreau Industries' board of directors inviting her to a charity gala. The subject line read, "In support of the Laurent Foundation." She froze. It was signed by Leonard himself. Claire leaned over her shoulder, eyes wide. "You're not actually going to go, are you?" Isabel's heart pounded. "If it's for the children's program, I have to." "He'll be there," Claire warned. "Then I'll handle it," Isabel said, more to herself than to anyone. The night of the gala arrived, glimmering with excess, crystal chandeliers, gold linens, the hum of cameras outside. Isabel stepped out of the taxi in a simple navy gown, elegant without flash. She hated these events, the way wealth wrapped itself around pain and called it purpose. Inside, Leonard spotted her instantly. He had expected her, hoped for her, but seeing her in person still hit like a blow. She carried herself with quiet grace, chin high, as though the world's judgment couldn't touch her anymore. When their eyes met, time seemed to slow. He approached carefully, stopping just close enough for her to hear his breath. "You came," he said softly. "For the foundation," she corrected. "Not for you." "Of course." He hesitated. "You look strong. Strong enough to survive your world," she said. "But not eager to stay in it." A flicker of regret crossed his face. "I deserve that." "You deserve honesty," she replied. "And so do I." The MC announced the start of the program before either could say more. Cameras turned toward them as they took their seats near the stage. Leonard spoke about community, responsibility, and change, his words surprisingly heartfelt. "There are things money can't repair," he said into the microphone, glancing briefly at Isabel. "But perhaps it can build something better for those who still can." The audience applauded, and Isabel felt a strange warmth spread in her chest, hope, maybe, or something close to forgiveness. Yet just as the applause faded, a murmur rippled through the crowd. A journalist had slipped inside, shouting a question from the back, "Mr. Moreau, is it true your ex-wife is suing for emotional damages?" Cameras turned, flashes erupting. Isabel froze, blindsided. Leonard's eyes darkened. "That's false," he said firmly, but the chaos was already unfolding. Security escorted the reporter out, but the damage was done. The headlines would twist the moment before dawn. Isabel rose, ready to leave. "I can't do this again," she whispered. "Every time I try to move on, your world drags me back." Leonard reached for her arm. "Please, just wait." "No," she said, pulling free. "You told me not to cry at my son's funeral because of your image. You don't get to decide how I live my grief anymore." The room had quieted, whispers filled the edges like static. Leonard's face paled. "You're right," he said softly, barely audible. "I don't get to decide anything. I just wanted to make it right." "Then let me go," she said, eyes glistening. She turned and walked out, ignoring the murmurs, the stares, the pity. Leonard remained frozen, the applause from earlier now echoing hollowly in his ears. Later that night, Isabel sat in her car outside the center, the gala's glow far behind her. She was shaking, not from anger but from exhaustion. How many times could love break the same person before it killed what was left? Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something in her gut told her to answer. "Isabelle Laurent," a voice asked briskly. "Yes?" "This is Detective Renaud from the Paris Police Department. I'm afraid there's been an incident involving Mr. Moreau." Isabelle's breath caught. What kind of incident?" "A car accident. Near Pont-Neuf. He's alive, but in critical condition." For a long second, the world stopped moving. She barely remembered how she drove, only that the streets blurred beneath her headlights as tears threatened to blind her. At the hospital, she found Emile pacing outside the ICU. He rushed toward her. "He asked for you," he said. "He shouldn't even be awake, but he said your name first." Isabelle's voice trembled. "Can I see him?" Emile hesitated. "The doctor said only family. I was his family," she said, stepping past him before he could argue. Inside, Leonard lay pale and bruised, tubes running from his arm, oxygen mask fogging with each shallow breath. Yet when he saw her, his eyes softened with relief. "You came," he whispered, voice hoarse. Isabelle swallowed hard, tears slipping free. "You scared me," she said. "You really don't know how to stop breaking things, do you?" He gave a weak smile. "Maybe I crashed on purpose. I needed you to come." "Don't joke," she whispered, gripping his hand. "You're all bones and regret right now." He looked at her, a trace of the old fire in his eyes. "Regret's what got me here. Maybe it's time I start living differently, if I get that chance." Isabelle squeezed his hand tighter. "Then start by living, Leonard. Just live." A faint tear rolled down his temple. "I will. If you'll let me make it right." She didn't answer, but her silence carried more forgiveness than any words could. Outside, dawn began to break, painting the hospital windows gold. For the first time, neither of them was running anymore. Leonard's recovery stretched longer than anyone expected, partly because his body healed slower than his pride. The accident had left him with a broken leg, fractured ribs, and a concussion that turned simple movements into painful reminders of his mortality. The press waited like vultures outside the hospital, spinning stories about a fallen titan. Isabelle visited every day, not out of obligation but because guilt and habit tangled inside her chest until she couldn't stay away. The first few days were awkward. She sat by his bedside, arms crossed, refusing to meet his gaze. He tried to speak, she answered with clipped sentences. Their silence was thick with old words unsaid. "You don't have to be here," he muttered one afternoon, staring at the four-drip. "I know," she said, not looking up from her book. "Then why are you?" "Because someone has to make sure you don't charm the nurses into letting you skip physical therapy." He gave a weak chuckle. "You think I'm capable of charm right now?" "You always were when it suited you," she replied. The room fell silent again, but beneath the barbs lingered something that felt almost like familiarity. That evening, as she left, the doctor stopped her. "He's refusing to stay in rehab," the man said quietly. "He insists on going home early." Isabel frowned. That's reckless. I told him that, the doctor said. He mentioned you might convince him otherwise. Her jaw tightened. Of course he did. The next morning, when she entered the room, Leonard was sitting up, signing discharge papers. You're leaving? She asked sharply. I'm not an invalid, Isabel. You can barely walk. Then I'll crawl. I'm not staying here another day. She folded her arms. You think stubbornness is strength? It's not. And what would you call it? Cowardice, she said evenly. His eyes flashed, but he said nothing. When she realized he was determined, she sighed. Fine. You can leave, but you'll need someone to help you until you can manage stairs. I'll arrange a nurse. No, he said quickly. I don't want a stranger in my home. Then what do you suggest? He hesitated. You. The word hung between them like smoke. Absolutely not, she said. I'm not your caretaker. You already are, he said quietly. You've been here every day. You can keep pretending it's guilt, but we both know it's more than that. Her throat tightened. Don't twist this into something it's not. Then tell me what it is, he challenged. She turned away, heart pounding. It's pity, Leonard. Nothing more. He smiled bitterly. I'll take pity over indifference. Against her better judgment, she agreed to help him for a few days, only until a nurse could be found. That was how she ended up back in the apartment they once shared, now colder and emptier than she remembered. The photos of their wedding were gone, replaced by abstract art and minimalist decor, as if he'd tried to erase any trace of her. You redecorated, she said flatly. Had to, he replied, limping toward the sofa. The ghosts were too loud. Guess they found a way back in. He shot her a look, half amusement, half pain. I'm realizing ghosts don't need an invitation. The first night was unbearable. She cooked dinner, he complained about the bland hospital diet, and they bickered like strangers forced under the same roof. You're supposed to eat something other than whiskey and regret, she scolded as she set down a plate of soup. Soup, he muttered, staring at it. The food of a defeated. Then eat your defeat quietly. Despite herself, she almost smiled. Later, as she cleared the dishes, she heard him groan from the couch. What now? She asked, exasperated. The painkillers wore off, he admitted, wincing. She sighed and fetched his medication. When she returned, he was half asleep, his face softened in the dim light. Without the armor of arrogance, he looked fragile, almost boyish. She handed him the pills, and their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away. Thank you, he murmured. Don't thank me, she whispered. Just heal. But that night, as she lay on the guest bed down the hall, she couldn't stop hearing his ragged breathing, couldn't stop remembering the way his voice had broken when he said you. In the morning, she found him struggling to stand with his crutch, cursing under his breath. You're supposed to call for help, she said. I don't need help. You do. You just hate admitting it. And you love reminding me, he shot back. Someone has to. They locked eyes, the air charged. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, softer, Leonard said, Do you ever think about him? About our son. Isabel's voice caught. Every day. So do I, he said. He's everywhere. In the quiet, in the mirrors, in my nightmares. Her guard dropped for the briefest second. Then stop running from it, she said. Running doesn't bring him back. Neither does drowning in grief, he whispered. But maybe it makes us remember we're still human. Isabel turned away, her throat burning. You talk like someone who's learned too late. Maybe I have, he said. But I'm still learning. When she left the room, her hands trembled. She hated that part of her wanted to believe him. That night, rain lashed against the windows again, and she caught herself standing in the doorway to his room, watching him sleep. His brow furrowed, pain flickering across his features, and she whispered, "Why is it always you I can't stop forgiving?" The question vanished into the storm. By the end of the week, the walls between them had started to crack, though neither would admit it. Isabel still cooked, cleaned, and managed his appointments like she was clocking in for penance, and Leonard still pretended he didn't need her, but every moment felt like a battlefield, every silence louder than shouting. One afternoon, the tension finally snapped. Leonard was on a business call, hobbling through the living room with his crutch, refusing to rest as the doctor had ordered. "I said sell the shares," he barked into his phone. "No, I don't care what the analysts say. If the market doesn't trust me, we make them remember who built it." Isabel, folding laundry nearby, couldn't help but mutter, "And there it is, the dictator returns." He turned, glare sharp. "Excuse me." "You," she said, slamming a towel on the table. "The man who can't stop controlling everything, even from a hospital bed." "This isn't about control," he snapped. "It's about survival." "Your survival? Or your image's survival?" "Same thing." "No," she shot back. "That's your problem. You can't tell the difference anymore." He hung up, jaw tight. "You think I enjoy this? You think I want to care about a company when I can barely stand?" "You don't care about the company," she said. "You care about what losing it says about you." Leonard limped closer, eyes blazing. "You think you know me?" "I did," she said coldly. "Once. Before you became a headline." His voice lowered, dangerous. "And what about you, Isabel? The saint who gets to be everyone's savior but can't save herself." Her breath caught. "Don't you dare. You hide behind those children," he continued, voice trembling with anger. "You pour every ounce of love into them so you don't have to feel what you lost." "At least I feel something," she said, eyes glistening. "You replaced your pain with power and called it redemption." "Maybe power is all I have left," he shouted. "It's the only thing that listens when the world stops caring." The air between them cracked like glass. For a moment, neither moved, both breathing hard, their pain spilling into the open like blood. Then Isabel whispered, "That's why you told me not to cry at the funeral, isn't it? Because if you saw me break, you'd have to admit you already were." The words hit him like a punch. Leonard's eyes filled with something raw, shame, grief, maybe both. "I didn't mean it," he said quietly. "That day, I was trying to survive the cameras, the investors, the whispers. I thought if I fell apart, I'd lose everything." "You already had," she whispered. "You lost us." The silence that followed was unbearable. Finally, Leonard looked away. "I don't expect forgiveness." "Good," she said softly. "Because I'm not ready to give it." She turned toward the kitchen, but his voice stopped her. "Then why are you still here?" Isabel froze. "Because I don't trust you not to starve or fall down a flight of stairs," she said, forcing a laugh. "And maybe because I'm not ready to let go either." His chest tightened. "You still care." "Caring doesn't mean forgiving," she said, her voice cracking. "It means I remember what we used to be, and that hurts enough." Later that night, she found him asleep on the couch, a glass of untouched water beside him, the city lights painting his face in soft gold. She stood there a long time, watching the rise and fall of his chest, the steady rhythm of someone who once felt like home. When she finally turned away, he stirred and whispered her name in his sleep. The sound made her throat ache. The next morning, the tension was quieter, replaced by something fragile and heavy. Isabel was making coffee when Leonard limped into the kitchen. "About yesterday," he said, his tone gentler. "You don't need to apologize," she murmured. "I wasn't going to," he said with a faint smile, then added, "but I will." She arched an eyebrow. "Is that humility I'm hearing?" "Don't get used to it," he replied. "It feels strange." "It looks strange too," she teased softly. He chuckled, wincing as pain shot through his ribs. Instinctively, she reached to steady him, her hands resting against his arm. For a moment, their eyes met, Too close, too honest. The tension shifted again, no longer anger but something raw and magnetic. Leonard's voice dropped to a whisper. You know what's worse than losing everything? What? She breathed. Getting it all back and realizing the one thing you needed can't be bought. Isabel's pulse quickened. Don't do this. Do what? Say things that make me remember. Maybe remembering is the only way we stop being strangers. She pulled away, blinking fast. You always did know how to weaponize words. Not this time, he said. This time I mean everyone. She busied herself with pouring the coffee, pretending her hands weren't shaking. Drink your humility while it's hot, she said lightly, handing him a mug. It won't last long. He smiled faintly. You always did have the last word. Because you never listened long enough to keep it. Despite the bite in her tone, her lips curved. For the first time since their son's death, the air between them felt human again, messy, painful, real. Later that day, when she caught him staring at the framed photo of their child she'd placed by the window, he didn't hide it. He'd have been taller than me by now, Leonard murmured. Isabel swallowed hard. He'd have had your laugh. Leonard looked at her, tears glimmering in his eyes. Maybe that's why I've been afraid to laugh since. Isabel couldn't answer. The dam she'd been holding back threatened to break, but she simply nodded and whispered, then maybe it's time you tried again. Reflection question for viewers: can broken love ever find a rhythm again once truth has stripped it bare? Drop your thoughts below, and if this scene made you feel something, hit that like button so we can keep unraveling their story together. By the time the first snow began to fall, the uneasy truce between Isabel and Leonard had become a quiet pattern: shared breakfasts, clipped conversations, long silences filled with things they both pretended not to feel. He moved more freely now, but the limp in his stride remained, a visible reminder of the crash, of consequences finally catching up. She should have left once he could manage alone, that had been the deal. Yet each time she packed her bag, something made her pause. Maybe it was duty, maybe it was unfinished grief, maybe it was love refusing to die. The illusion of peace shattered one afternoon when the doorbell rang. Standing there was a young woman in a sharp navy suit, a journalist Isabel recognized from the tabloids. Mrs. Moreau, she greeted with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. I was hoping to speak with you about your husband's accident. Isabel's jaw tightened. Ex-husband. And there's nothing to say. On the contrary, the woman said, her recorder already in hand. Sources claim the crash wasn't an accident, that Mr. Moreau was under investigation for insider trading and fled a meeting that could have exposed him. Isabel's heart dropped. That's a lie. Then help me clear it up, the journalist pressed. You were living with him again, weren't you? He's recovering, Isabel snapped. You can leave now. Leonard appeared behind her, leaning on his cane. I believe my assistant told you I don't comment on rumors. The woman smiled, victorious. So you're confirming nothing. I'm confirming you should leave before I have you removed, he said evenly. She hesitated, then retreated, calling over her shoulder, the truth always finds its way out, Mr. Moreau. When the door closed, Isabel rounded on him. What was that about? Insider trading? Is it true? No, he said flatly. Then why does she think it is? Because lies sell faster than apologies. Don't play the martyr, she said. If there's something you're hiding, I deserve to know. He met her gaze, pain flickering beneath the anger. The only thing I'm hiding is how close I am to losing everything that matters. You mean your company, she said bitterly. I mean you, he answered. The air went still. Isabel felt her defenses crumble for one terrifying second before she whispered, Don't. You don't get to say that after everything. Why not? He demanded. Because it's true. Because it's too late. No, he said quietly, stepping closer. Too late is when we stop fighting for what's left. She wanted to argue, to walk away, but his voice, raw, stripped of ego, froze her in place. You can't fix what broke us, she murmured. I can't bring back our son, can't erase what you said at the funeral. I know, he said, voice breaking. But I can spend the rest of my life trying to be the man he would have been proud of. Something inside her shifted, fragile and dangerous. Words are easy, Leonard. Then watch me prove them, he said. Stay until the end of the month. If I can't show you change, you'll never have to see me again. Isabel stared at him for a long moment, torn between anger and something softer. You think a month will erase years of damage? No, he whispered. But maybe it'll remind us we were more than just tragedy. Against her better judgment, she nodded. 1 month. After that, I'm gone. His smile was small, hopeful, and it scared her more than his arrogance ever had. That night, she stood by the window, watching snow fall over the city. Somewhere behind her, Leonard's piano began to play, a melody she hadn't heard in years, the lullaby he used to hum for their son. The notes were hesitant at first, then sure, then trembling with emotion. Isabel closed her eyes. For the first time in a long while, she didn't cry. She just listened. The days that followed their uneasy truce were heavy with unspoken words. Isabel kept her promise to stay until the end of the month, but every morning she woke up with the quiet dread of someone waiting for a wound to reopen. Leonard, for his part, seemed determined to prove something, but no one, not even he, was sure what. He'd stopped taking work calls after the journalist's visit, instead spending his time in the study, surrounded by papers, financial statements, and photos from a life he'd once curated like a brand. One evening, Isabel walked past his open door and froze. He was sitting on the floor, surrounded by old photo albums, their wedding, their child's first birthday, summer vacations they'd taken before money replaced laughter. I forgot I even had these, he murmured, not looking up. They were boxed away in storage. Probably for a reason, she said softly. Some memories hurt too much. He gave a bitter smile. Or maybe I was afraid to remember the man I used to be. He gestured to a photo of himself, arms around her, grinning at a seaside cafe. I look happy. You were, she said. Before you thought success meant never showing weakness. I thought strength was what kept people safe. No, she whispered. Love is. For a moment, silence held them. Then Leonard said, there's something you don't know about that day, the funeral. Isabel stiffened. Leonard, please. Just listen. He stood, gripping the back of the chair for balance. The morning before the service, the board threatened to remove me as CEO. They said the press coverage after our son's death made me look unstable. Investors were panicking. I was one step away from losing the company, the one thing I built from nothing. And I panicked. I thought if I broke down, if the world saw me fall apart, I'd lose everything, including the last thing that made me feel in control. His voice cracked. So when I told you not to cry, it wasn't because I didn't care. It was because I was already drowning. Isabel stared at him, tears threatening. You could have told me, she said, her voice trembling. You could have let me help you carry it. I didn't know how, he said. My whole life, I was taught that men don't break. My father used to say, you can be feared, or you can be forgotten. I chose fear, and I lost everything anyway. Leonard, you want to know what else? He said bitterly. He died the week before our wedding. I swore I'd never be like him. But the moment the company took off, I started sounding just like him, cold, untouchable. Even when you told me you were pregnant, I didn't cry. I smiled, shook your hand, and went back to work. What kind of man does that? A broken one, she whispered. But you don't have to stay broken. Her words were soft but hit hard. He looked at her, his eyes glistening. Do you still believe that? I want to, she said. But believing doesn't erase what happened. He nodded slowly. Then let me show you who I am without the cameras. Later that night, Isabel walked into the study to find him writing something on the back of a photograph. What are you doing? She asked. Letting go, he said simply. This picture, it's the last one we took as a family. I've looked at it every night for 3 years, telling myself it was punishment. But maybe it's supposed to be a reminder. Of what? That grief doesn't end when you bury someone. It ends when you forgive yourself for surviving. Isabel didn't answer. Instead, she walked closer, looking at the photo of her, Leonard, and their son, smiling under the spring sun. For the first time, she saw something she'd missed all those years ago, his hand resting protectively on her back, his eyes fixed not on the camera, but on her. He'd loved her, even then, in his flawed and silent way. But before she could speak, Leonard said something that changed everything. You weren't the only one who blamed me for what happened that day. She turned sharply. What do you mean? He swallowed hard. The crash wasn't random. The driver, the one who hit us, was an investor I fired. He'd lost everything after a scandal, and I refused to help. He'd been drinking when he ran the red light. I told the press it was an accident because I couldn't stomach the truth that my pride cost our son his life. Isabel's hand flew to her mouth. Leonard, I didn't tell you because I thought you'd never look at me again. And you were right, she whispered, voice breaking. But now I see you never looked at yourself either. He nodded, tears falling freely now. I didn't deserve forgiveness. No one does, she said softly. That's why it's called grace. They stood there, raw and trembling, the weight of their history pressing down. Isabel wanted to hate him, to scream, to run, but all she could feel was exhaustion and a strange, aching relief. For the first time, the truth had burned clean through the lies, and what remained was real. As she turned to leave, he whispered, "Thank you for staying long enough to see me." She paused in the doorway, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't thank me yet." That night, Isabel couldn't sleep. Leonard's confession echoed in her mind like a heartbeat she couldn't silence. The truth about the crash, the guilt he had carried, it twisted everything she thought she knew about their past. But beneath the anger, something deeper stirred, recognition. She, too, had secrets that had eaten her alive for years. By dawn, she found herself standing in the doorway of the study, watching Leonard asleep at his desk, the photograph of their family still clutched in his hand. He looked younger in sleep, almost like the man she'd fallen in love with. But when he stirred and met her eyes, the fragile peace shattered again. "Couldn't sleep," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "No," she said quietly. "You dropped a lot on me last night." "I know," he whispered. "But it's the truth." "Then it's time I tell you mine." His brows furrowed. "Yours?" Isabel took a deep breath, bracing herself. "That day, the day of the crash, I wasn't supposed to be there." Leonard's confusion deepened. "What are you talking about?" "I was supposed to fly to Paris for a charity event," she said. "But I cancelled last minute because I'd found something." She hesitated, pain flickering across her face. "A letter." "From who?" "From your assistant." Leonard's breath caught. "What letter?" "She wrote that you were having an affair," Isabel said bluntly, the words slicing through the air. "That you told her you were going to leave me after the launch party that weekend." "That's not true," he said immediately. I know," she cut in, voice trembling. "I found out later it was a lie. She wanted to hurt me because I refused to fund her project. But that morning, I believed it. I was so angry, Leonard. I was ready to take our son and leave before you even came home. But when you called and said you wanted to take him to the lake, I said yes. I thought I could watch you both one last time before I walked away." Leonard's face paled. "So you were in the car that day, because of that letter?" Isabel nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "If I hadn't read it, if I hadn't let pride win, maybe he'd still be here." "Don't," Leonard said sharply, stepping forward. "Don't you dare blame yourself." "Why not?" she cried. "You've been doing it for years." He shook his head, his voice cracking. "You think our son's death was punishment, but it wasn't. It was tragedy. It was chaos. It wasn't your fault, Isabel. And it wasn't yours, she whispered. They stood facing each other, raw and trembling, years of buried grief between them like a ghost that refused to rest. Leonard's voice softened. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to hate you, she said honestly. And if I'd told you, I'd have to admit I was wrong. He gave a broken laugh, rubbing a hand over his face. We were both so good at pretending to be right, we forgot how to be human. Maybe, she said softly. But now there's nothing left to hide behind. For the first time, they were stripped bare, no titles, no power, just two people standing in the wreckage of what they'd built, finally seeing the truth. Spring returned like forgiveness, quiet, slow, and almost shy. The snow that had buried the city melted into clear streams that ran along the curbs, carrying with them the last traces of winter's grief. It had been 6 weeks since Isabel first stepped back into Leonard's world, and now she stood at the edge of it again, suitcase by the door, the morning light spilling across the apartment like a silent witness. Leonard was in the kitchen, making coffee, wearing the same grey sweater he used to wear when their son was still alive. There was a calm between them now, not the heavy silence of resentment, but the soft hush that follows a long-awaited truth. So this is goodbye, she said quietly. He turned, his eyes tired but warm. For now. She smiled faintly. You always did hate finality. Only when it comes to you, he said, setting the mugs down. Stay for breakfast, at least. If I stay for breakfast, you'll talk me into lunch. And if I talk you into lunch, you'll talk me into forever, she whispered, a sad smile curving her lips. And that's not fair to either of us. He nodded, the weight of understanding settling between them. You're right. We're better now because we finally stopped pretending. And maybe that's enough. Isabel took the mug he offered, fingers brushing his. The touch was fleeting but electric, full of the things they no longer needed to say. What will you do now? She asked. I stepped down, he said quietly. From the company. Her eyes widened. You did. The board wanted blood after the rumors. For once, I didn't fight. I told them they were right, I'd let ambition cost me too much already. So I'm leaving it behind. Isabel studied him, seeing not the powerful CEO the world feared, but a man, flawed, humbled, and finally free. What will you do instead? Something that matters, he said. I started a foundation. In our son's name. For families who lose children and can't afford the help they need to keep living after. Tears filled her eyes, but this time, they didn't burn. He'd be proud of you. Leonard smiled faintly. Maybe. But I think he'd be prouder of us. She looked down, tracing the rim of her mug, then said, Do you remember what you told me that day? At the funeral. He flinched. Every word. You said it was bad for your image if I cried. And it was the worst thing I ever said. No, she said softly. It was the truest thing you didn't know how to say. You were telling me not to fall apart because you didn't know how to catch me if I did. Leonard's breath caught. Isabel, it's all right, she whispered. We were both trying to survive something impossible. For a long time, they just stood there, the quiet hum of the coffee machine filling the space between heartbeats. Then Isabel reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the photograph he'd written on, the one of their family at the lake. She handed it to him. You should keep this. I was going to give it to you, he said, confused. No, she replied gently. It belongs here. You need it more. He turned the photo over, his handwriting faded but still visible. Grief doesn't end when you bury someone. It ends when you forgive yourself for surviving. You taught me that, she said softly. And I'll remember. Leonard looked at her, the tears finally breaking free. You'll come back, won't you? Maybe one day, she said. When coming back doesn't hurt anymore. He nodded, accepting what love sometimes has to become, not possession, but peace. They walked together to the door, neither wanting to be the first to open it. Finally, Isabel took his hand, squeezed it once, and whispered, "Goodbye, Leonard." "Goodbye, Isabel," he said, voice trembling. As she stepped into the hall, sunlight brushed across her face. She didn't look back. But when the elevator doors closed, she heard the faint sound of the piano from the apartment, the same melody he had played that snowy night, now fuller, lighter, healed. It followed her all the way down. Months later, she stood before a small crowd at the opening of the Morrow Foundation's first center, her name listed beside his on the plaque. Leonard sat in the audience, quiet, proud, his eyes finding hers through the crowd. No words were exchanged. None were needed. When the ceremony ended, he approached her, and for a moment they just stood there, two survivors of the same storm, smiling with the calm of people who finally understood that love doesn't always have to end, it just has to change shape. "He'd have liked this place," Isabel said. "Especially the garden." "He'd have run through it," Leonard replied softly, laughing. She nodded, eyes glistening. "We did good, didn't we?" "We did," he said. "Even if it took losing everything to find what mattered." The sun broke through the clouds then, spilling golden light over the courtyard. Isabel turned to leave, and this time, Leonard didn't stop her. He simply watched her go, knowing that some goodbyes aren't the end, they're the beginning of forgiveness. As the crowd dispersed, Leonard stood alone before the plaque, tracing the engraved letters of their son's name. He whispered something so quietly that only the wind could carry it, "I forgive you. I forgive me." And for the first time in years, his shoulders eased, his heart lighter, his breath steady. Above him, the breeze stirred the leaves, soft and melodic, almost like laughter. He smiled through the tears, realizing that grief had finally turned into grace. Do you believe true love always means staying, or sometimes, does it mean learning to let go with grace? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story touched you, leave a like so more people can feel it too.